There's a lot of different numbers that are out there. I mean, you're hearing things from 70% to 96% of the kids who are raised in an evangelical Christian home at 18 are leaving the church. And you know, the numbers vary a little bit, but
joining me in studio right now is Teddy James, who is a staff writer for American Family Association Journal, and he's also our Meeke, this show's youth and culture expert. Teddy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, whenever I start talking about kids and what's happening in the culture, I look to you, and because you have your finger on the pulse, you're writing about this stuff, you are immersed in the culture, keeping up with it, speaking to youth groups and doing those kinds of things. So why are we losing our youth? Why are they falling away from the faith? And even as you heard Eric in the first segment said that it's happening before they make their way onto the college campus. It's happening inside some of those youth groups that you're ministering
It's happening inside the youth groups, it's happening inside churches, but most importantly, it's happening inside the homes. George Barna, who founded the Barna Group, which is a kind of Christian Gallup poll, if you will, they have done tons and tons of research on why teenagers are leaving the church, and one of the results of that has been this book called You Lost Me, Why Young Christians Are Leaving the Church and Rethinking Faith. One of the things that they found is, in fact, I got to interview the president of Barna, David Kinnaman, and what he says is I would classify American Christianity as a mile wide and an inch deep. What we've done is we've become very, very powerful at evangelism. We bring people into the door. In fact, we have equated evangelism with bringing people to church.
Wow.
Not telling people about Jesus, telling people about my church.
Yeah.
And the concept of discipleship has completely left the church. So what we have teenagers who come into churches, they come into youth groups, and they're playing games, they're eating pizza, and there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love mixing pizza. I love playing games with teenagers. But there's a time for that.
Yeah.
And there's more time that needs to be devoted to actual discipleship. Now, before we go too far into this discussion, I want to say a word to the parents, because I've been a youth pastor for many years.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen is that parents look to me for the discipleship of their kids. That's not my job.
Yeah.
That's not the job of any youth pastor. That is the job of the parent. The youth pastor echoes what the parents are already doing. That's the way it's supposed to go. But so often we have parents that come to youth pastors and say, hey, what are you teaching this week that I need to be kind of reinforcing? And that's great. You need to have that discussion. But could a youth pastor go to a parent and say, hey, what are you doing at home that I can echo on Wednesday nights?
Oh, wow. This is really good, because what you're saying is that the concept of youth groups in churches needs to change. So say, for example, on any given Wednesday night, you've got mom and dad dropping, their 3 kids off, at their youth group meeting that's happening away from the larger church. But now churches started to do this because they felt like they were not reaching today's youth. So they said, you know what? Let's take them out of the larger church setting, because a lot of this is over their head. They're snoozing in the back of the church, and let's give them a pizza party. Let's make it a hop-in service where they feel like they're just having a good time, and hopefully some good stuff's gonna seep in. But it seems like the result of doing that hasn't been very good.
Yeah, we have to be really careful not to overgeneralize.
Okay.
Because there are youth groups, across the country that are doing some fantastic work.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing amazing work. They have disciples, just left and right. In fact, case in point, the church where I grew up, my youth pastor, his name was Kent Shepard, the greatest youth pastor I have ever seen in my life. Kent Shepard. When I was there, we had 4 guys surrendered to ministry that are still in ministry today. I'm one of those guys. We have females who knew and devoted their life to the ministry of the church. And while they're not on staff, they are serving Christ in any way that they can. So we have youth groups all over the place that are doing fantastic, phenomenal work.
So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't say stop separating kids, is what you're saying.
Eric said we need to self-examine our lives as believers. Well, we also need to examine our ministries. We need to examine our churches and ask this question: is our back door as big as our front door? We're bringing in all these teenagers, and we're having them come in, and you hit the nail right on the head. You said parents are dropping their kids off. But a lot of these parents aren't going to the big church. They're going out
To have
grocery
dinner.
shopping. They're going, yeah, it's
They're taking a break. Oh,
and
wow,
church
yeah.
has become a babysitter rather than a discipler.
Yeah.
And that's not just the view of the parents, it's also kind of become the view of the church itself.
Yeah. Let's talk about culture and its impact on the job that parents are striving to do to raise kids who understand the gospel, understand what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Because we can do what we know to do, but if at some point, any point, we fall asleep, there's someone at the helm ready to take over. And I would say, you know, the big bully right now in our parenting is media. It's television,
Very
it's
much.
movies, it's books, it's
Internet.
magazines, it's internet. And so how do we sift through all of this? You know, how do we parent without, you know, trying to be controlling, but how do, you know?
Right. And that's the thing. You can't allow your kids to walk around, you know, the neighborhood with your arms hugged around them.
Why not, TJ?
You know?
Why not? What's so wrong with, I mean, what is that?
Yeah, you can't do that, Meeke. I'm sorry. But here's the big thing. That is what parents want to do. And that's absolutely wrong, because what's going to happen are your kids are going to graduate high school and they're going to go and they're going to say, "Ooh, I've never experienced this before. Let me try it."
Yeah.
Whereas before, if you give them some freedom and you talk to them and you say, "Hey, this is out there and I don't want you to experience it, and here's why." Because 20 years down the road, you're still going to feel the effects of it.
Now, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say? Because now, TJ, I should mention you're a new dad. You
am.
have a
I
new
am.
baby girl, Karis
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, right? And so this discussion has a new meaning for you. This
Very
is not
much.
just
And
theory.
so this has scared me to death.
Yeah, exactly. So now with painting that backdrop, what do you mean when you say give them some freedom?
Well, I think for
Define
each
that.
child, that's going to be a little bit different.
Okay,
All
good.
right. So for me, I was raised in a military home. My dad was, it was his way or no way.
Military.
And that's it. So now my sister was a very, very godly girl. She was very smart, very wise, still is. Hopefully she won't watch this because she'll pick on me forever about it. But my parents were able to give her a little more freedom because they could trust her a little more, quite blatantly. Me, on the other hand, I had some issues.
Yeah.
And so my parents, they would give me a little bit of trust, a little bit of freedom. And if I proved myself right, then they would give me a little more, maybe a later curfew, maybe, whatever. So, I mean, for each kid, I'm not really sure what that looks like.
That's good, yeah.
But I can say this. We need to give them the freedom to ask us questions. This generation there's never been a generation before that has had this much access to information and knowledge and a lack of wisdom.
Oh,
you
that's
see, now that's
good.
the big thing. They
That's
have
good.
more knowledge than any generation before, but they have the absolute absence of wisdom because they're not talking to adults.
Yeah, and we know, and this is so good. Let me hang out there just for a couple more seconds. We know that knowledge does not equate to wisdom.
Absolutely.
We know this because you can know so much, but if you don't implement the good of what you know, the outcome of that is devastating. You know, so that's really good because our kids do have access to a lot, but they're not using wisdom or not being taught what
But
wisdom is.
here's the beauty of it. Right now, teenagers are better than adults at deciphering good information and bad information. Because they have this deluge of information coming at them constantly, and they have really, really good filters of saying, I don't need to pay attention to that. This is really good. This is going to have an impact on me, and I need to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
They're more involved in culture than any generation before, and they're able to say, hey, this is a trend. This is going to be important. This is going to be important in a couple of weeks. I'm going to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
And that's why Twitter is so cool, because you get to see the trending topics of what teenagers are saying is important.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do as parents and as adults, one, we need to be keeping an eye on what's trending, on what's big. Two, we need to be informed. And it's hard to be informed because it's my full-time job to be informed, and I'm behind, to be quite frank.
Wow.
So here's the thing. It's really, really tough, but you can be informed by asking questions. Ask your kids, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then allow them to ask you questions. I think one of the biggest reasons that teenagers are leaving the church is because they have this access of information. And because they have this access of information, they're asking questions that people their age have never asked before.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're asking some extremely deep, theological, meaningful, life-filled questions, and adults are thinking, okay, I know how to ask, I know how to answer this, but how do I answer it on your level?
Well, you know what's scarier to me than the parent saying, I know how to answer this, but I can't answer it on your level? The parent who doesn't know how to answer it. The parent who has not herself or himself learned how to give a defense for the faith, learned how to give a reason for the hope that they have within them. And a lot of our kids are disillusioned with that. They're like, you know, we want to have some answers to these questions, but we want to tell our kids, all you need to know is that Jesus loves you and he died for you.
Right, and that's not enough for them. It's not, because they say, okay, I get that, but what do I do with blank?
Yeah, yeah.
What do I do with
They're
the
living
issue
in
of
real life.
with my best friend who just said that he's gay? What do I do with that?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so we need to have these real, honest, frank discussions with our kids.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, the media's going to.
And they already are having these
Absolutely.
discussions. They're already dictating to our kids what is moral and what is right. And, you know, here's the deal. I think when parents get into a discussion with their kids, you know, a lot of times, and, you know, I hate to admit this, but I'm going to have to be honest, you know, I want to win. You know what I mean? Like I look at my daughter and I want an immediate response to what I'm saying, i.e. I want to win. And so I want you to do what I'm telling without a whole lot of explanation. And now this is working because, you know, she's 5. And so I don't have to have this grand explanation. It can be because I'm mom, go do it. But that doesn't work so well when your kid is 15 and she's staring at you and she's like, well, I don't understand why this decision has to be made or why it has to be this way. We've got to be ready to combat that.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Teenagers are a lot smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
And so when we just say, you know what, here's the thing. I'm going to explain my reasoning to you as your parent, and I'm going to realize that you're a young adult. And I'm going to realize you can make decisions on your own.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my reason, and I'm going to ask you to go and contemplate my reasoning, formulate a response, and come back to me with your response.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It shows a whole lot of trust.
And that's the freedom.
Yeah.
You give them the freedom to not disrespectfully, get me right here, to not disrespectfully, but you give them the freedom to come back with another answer.
Yeah.
And so you compromise. So you're teaching your child, hey, there's more than one way to see an issue, because I see my side of it as the child. I need to try and see it as from the parent's side.
Yeah.
And that's really tough, especially when it's, you know, I don't want you to date that boy. Why, Mom? Because he's a bad boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they don't get that.
Yeah.
But when you can say, well, I see this in him, I see this in him.
Right.
Now take these 2 issues that I've talked about, go and contemplate them, and you tell me why they're okay.
And then let's discuss
And then let's discuss it.
again. Meeke's back in 2 minutes. Teddy, thank you so much. Appreciate you.